How's everybody doing? Welcome back to Ask That Podcast on YouTube. Got some comic books this time. Sorry, Cody, but you might enjoy these. I know you're a Disney guy. This is Uncle Scrooge. Walt Disney's Uncle Scrooge, and these are all from the mid-90s. Uncle Scrooge has a long history. I remember Uncle Scrooge was created for the comics when Dell had the Disney license. Carl Barks, as far as I know, created the Uncle Scrooge character. It's kind of like an extra in a Donald Duck story. He ended up becoming more popular than Donald Duck, and from that, we ended up the first animated appearance of Uncle Scrooge, as far as I know, is Mickey's Christmas Carol, where he plays Scrooge, of course. And then he became best known to people of the Generation X and newer generation, Generation X, Generation Y, the Millennials, whatever you want to call the people after Generation X. I'm not exactly sure. I prefer the term Generation Y, but I call them the Barney generation because they grew up on that stupid purple dinosaur. But was DuckTales. Which was, when DuckTales first started airing, I was not a kid anymore. I was preteen, maybe in my early. I still watched it every day after school because it was so well done. Great written stories, well animated. And that was the thing about Uncle Scrooge. They were just these great adventure stories. Well, in the early to mid 90s, Disney came back. There was a comic boom, and they realized that besides Archie and the recently revived Harvey, there was not many comics for kids. Sure, you had DC and Marvel, but a lot of their stuff at that time was, they were writing it for not younger kids, but like preteens and teens and older. I mean, it was not the way it was back. And they said, we're going to bring back our characters. And I ended up, my younger cousin, he's 6 to 8 at this time. He was getting into comics, and he loved him some Uncle Scrooge. I had some old Whitman Uncle Scrooge issues from the 70s and the early 80s, mostly from the 70s, that he had read and really enjoyed. So he started getting these, and my mother and I, as I think it was his birthday or Christmas each year, birthday or Christmas present, sorry. I'm stumbling over my words here. We would get him a subscription. So let's see, we're going to start with issue 279 from June 1993, $1.50, which at the time was a little bit more than the average comic. Average comic was like $1, but this one is damaged. These all came from my cousin's collection. He ended up not wanting them, and I guess his son didn't want them. Who knows on that end? I'm not going to get into that, but got this great little cover here of Donald digging up buried treasure and hitting Scrooge with the dirt. And these were either a combination of new stories and reprints. All right, in my new videos, you'll find Danger, Villains, Intrigue, and Best of All Me. Disney's Darkwing Duck, his favorite adventures, plus 2 free glow-in-the-Darkwing trading cards inside each video, while supplies last. I love Darkwing Duck. It was like the Duck characters, but a Batman, but he was kind of bumbling. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it. And it was one of those, I didn't see that much when it originally aired, but since then I've went back and watched it. Really well done. And our first story here is Uncle Scrooge back to long ago. In his latest adventure, Uncle Scrooge goes back in history briefly and gets a big surprise. The adventure begins one day as he's looking through his accounts. What's this? A tenant in one of my office buildings hasn't paid hadn't paid his rent in 3 months. Oh shit! Scrooge is gonna freak out. And this does look like an older one. This actually looks sort of like Carl Barks artwork. Oh, look at this! Thunderous Comic Tales, a must for your collection from Hollywood Comics, which is a sub-imprint of Disney. And they did Dinosaurs. Do y'all remember Dinosaurs? TGIF, ABC Fridays, Dinosaurs. It's a Henson production. Really cool show that I don't think I ever saw the last season as it was airing because it was a very dark ending to the series. Wouldn't mind getting some of those. I mean, this Scrooge gets hypnotized and goes back in time and finds out about this treasure and he's going to go find it. Oh, look at this. Comic Buyer's Guide. CBG, RIP. 1992 Fan Awards. I used to vote in these every year. You would vote in them for your favorite editor, writer, penciler, inker, colorist, painter, letterer, cover artist, comic book story, comic book, limited comic series, original graphic novel or album, reprint graphic novel or album, favorite character and publication about comics. And then, at least back then, the issue where the results were printed, you guys sent a free copy. Comics Buyer Guide was almost like, like Variety is to movies and TV, Comics Buyer Guide was to comics. This was pretty sure it was weekly publication. It was kind of newspaper size about comic books. It was so good. And sadly, it just kind of fizzled out. The internet helped kill it, but also Wizard magazine, which I have a love-hate relationship with Wizard, but back to this. There's Huey, Dewey, and Louie. And see, a lot of these stories were adapted for DuckTales, but Donald was a big part. I mean, of course, on the DuckTales cartoon, Donald was not really on it that much, and there's no Launchpad or Webby or any of them. They were created for the show, but still, really good stuff. If you like DuckTales, track these down, and these should not be expensive. As far as I know, most of these you can find fairly cheap, and they're still making Uncle Scrooge comics as far as I know. Excuse me. I like here, subscriptions. For a year's worth, which is 12 issues, they had Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, which was all the different Disney characters. That was $18 a year. That's not a bad price. And Uncle Scrooge Same Price, and the Donald Duck Adventures. And all these, as far as I know, were a mixture of reprints and new stuff. But then you had Carl Barks Library and Color comic albums from Gladstone/Disney. Because Gladstone was kind of handling the stuff at the time. They were a smaller company. And this was the Carl Barks Library of Walt Disney Comics and Stories in Colors, a 51-issue monthly series reprinting chronologically all Barks stories for Walt Disney Comics and Stories. Each issue includes a Carl Barks Heroes and Villains trading card. A 9-month bi-monthly series reprints Barks Uncle Scrooge one-pagers, Firestone giveaway Christmas stories, and Gyro Gear Loose solo stories, no trading cards included. 6-issue subscription would be $50. 12 issue would be $95, and subscription to bi-monthly series, all 9 issues, $65. Then they offer the older issues for a slight premium, but not horrible. They're asking $4 each. Oh, I'm sorry. The ones with the asterisk are in short supply, or first issues are in short supply or double issues. They're $4 each. Everything else was $10 minimum order. And look at it. You got DuckTales, you got Tailspin, Toontown, which was Roger Rabbit, Darkwing, Roger Rabbit, Goofy Adventures, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, Mickey Mouse Adventures, Donald Duck Adventures, Uncle Scrooge, and Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. And not too long after this, it just boiled down to basically they're doing Walt Disney's Comics and Stories and then 2 Uncle Scrooge titles. Because these were, I'm going to double check, make sure I get my information right. I'm pretty sure these were bi-monthly. You know what? It does not say, but I'm pretty sure they were bi-monthly. And usually you got one long story and a bunch of shorter ones. Oh, look at this. Tiny Toon Adventures, Buster's Hidden Treasure on the Genesis. Okay, they were Tiny Toon Adventures with some pretty good games. Good little cartoon. And there's Scrooge heading out to go get the treasure. The Carl Barks Library and Color. These are those. These are so damn good. I would love to have some of these, but the price, they're out of print now and they've went up. More and more people, thankfully, are realizing that these Uncle Scrooge things, especially by Barks, were not just for kids. They're well-written adventure stories. If you enjoy stuff like Indiana Jones, stuff like these are worth reading. Matter of fact, Indiana Jones to me was a combination of the old movie serials plus these Carl Barks, duck stories. Or as he's known back in the day, the Good Duck Man. Not Duck Man, but the Good Duck Space Man. In fact, this might take up the whole issue. And let they find I like this. The chest seems to be a lot lighter than when we buried it. Yes, all that weight didn't rust away. Well, whatever it is, it's ours. Good, Queen Bess won't miss the money. Whack! It's empty. No, it isn't. There's some old dried up potatoes inside. What the blazes? This note explains everything. It is written by Captain Hawk. It is my firm belief that these strange and wondrous vegetables will be greatly prized by Her Imperial Majesty. That adds, potatoes were unknown in England at the time. Well, what are you boys going to do with your rare old treasure? Plenty! But not half as much as we're going to do to a couple of hypnotists. And then we get a couple of little one-pagers, which are usually fairly funny. And then, of course, we get the Between the Lines, which gives you information what's coming out. And okay, let's see. This is Uncle Scrooge. Okay, back long ago, a long and terrific Carl Barks adventure where Uncle Scrooge and Donald discover their past lives. It leads to an ancient treasure in the Caribbean. Scrooge will have it all for himself unless Donald gets there first. Story and art by Carl Barks, covered by Don Rosa. Don Rosa, there was a time period where there was not Disney comics coming out in the States, but over in Europe, Disney comics are huge, and Don Rosa was doing stuff for the European publications, and he became the Carl Barks of my generation and generations after me. But and you had some names on this, so Donald Duck Adventure had Don Rosa. William Van Horn was another one who did a lot. I think he did more Mickey stuff than Don Rosa did. There's some actual names, like names you know from other comics, and there's none of them listed here after I say that. Like, Disney Adventures, Colossal Comics Collection. And then we get the mail bin where they'd always ask for people to send in pictures of them reading the comics in unusual locations, like this guy was in the Sears Tower. This kid was out on a boat, The best way to end any comic, sweet tarts. And, okay. Well, then, not too long after, that's 93. This is 95. A few years later, Gladstone started doing them. And the price stayed the same, but I know you probably can't tell. You see how shiny this is? Not shiny. This feels almost like newsprint. And that's about my only issue with this run, is that the covers, they rip easy, they get damaged very easy because it's almost newsprint. But this is part of the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. This was Don Rosa's magnum opus. He sat down to use all the information from just the Karl Barks stuff and created a timeline of the history of Scrooge McDuck from when he was born until he first made his money. It's so well written. This was just a really, really well done story. It lasted a long time. And since it's ended, he's filled in gaps here and there. There is one or two trades that reprint most of this, but they're sadly out of print. I don't know if anybody's put them back into print. I have most of the issues, but not all. And this was, okay, this shows you. Gargoyles. Everybody remember Gargoyles? Talking about the Skybox trading card. Skybox doesn't even exist anymore. This is part 10. The Invader of Fort Duckburg. Having made $1 billion in the Yukon, Scrooge McDuck has decided it's time to establish a home base from which to build a worldwide financial empire. To that end, he has left Scotland with his sisters Hortense and Matilda and is headed for a plot of land he owns on the American West Coast near a tiny settlement called Duckburg. So there's Duckburg. That's California. So Duckburg is somewhere in California. And this is from, front cover art by Don Rosa, colored by S. Daigle Leach. Uncle Scrooge and the Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck, Part 10, The Invader of Fort Duckburg, was written and drawn by Don Rosa, lettered by Todd Klein, and colored by S. Daigle Leach. The year was 1937. Donald Duck's name is changed to Daniel. Text by Bruce Hamilton. This is considered Series 3 of Uncle Scrooge. It's from October of 95, so it came out probably about August. The Bruce Hamilton Company, under the Gladstone imprint. And like I said, the cover is about the same, but look how the art is good, well written, very, very, just, oh man, I can't express enough. And look, the Junior Woodchucks, the origin of the Junior Woodchucks, the Beagle Boys, so much history and mythology. And that was the cool thing about this series. Not only was it entertaining to read this Lifetime, you learned a little about our history. You were educated as you're reading, but it was so well written. And I remember when this was coming out, I was reading this, and my other friends that read comics were kind of laughing. Oh, you're reading, Scrooge. Dude, this is good shit. They were busy, spending their extra comic money instead of, buying something else. Oh, I got to have, 12 copies of whatever issue of Spawn was out at the time, or whatever the speculation was on. And that's another thing that kind of hurt this series at the time. And some of these issues actually have a little value because people were not buying them. And the people that did were kids, and the copies got beat up, but people were spending their extra money speculating on, oh, I need 50 copies of Youngblood #1. I'm gonna send my kid to college with them. No, you're not. And full disclosure, I'm one of the assholes that bought 50 copies of Youngblood #1, 50 copies of Spawn #1. But I did sell my Spawns at a profit. I probably paid about $1 an issue, and I sold most of them when the Spawn live action movie came out for $8 to $10 a copy. The Youngbloods, well, yeah, I kind of sat on them forever, and I burnt some of them. That's why I don't speculate. I love the detail in this art. And the thing about this is that if I remember right, the European Disney comics are weekly, so you would not get this whole story in one issue. You get like a few pages, and I'm thinking right. That's Teddy Roosevelt. So more history here. And then look at this, Uncle Scrooge's Vault, the first appearance of his vault, as far as I know. And then we got The Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck by Don Rosa. Here we go. The main difficulty I had in writing this series was the number of pages I was allowed for each chapter. But Egmont, I guess. All the space I had to tell each chapter was 15 pages. My mission in each chapter was to include mentions of a list of Barksian facts from old Scrooge stories and devise a plot to string these facts together, which would have to cover up to 5 to 10 years in his life. And it just goes into history. How long has it been since you had tangy taffy? I never, because I've never had tangy taffy, but... And this part, I'm sure the kids reading this weren't real interested in this, but hey, I like this. Donald Duck's name is changed to Daniel, and gives you a history about that. And then we get another Scrooge story, and this is no title, and it's Uncle Scrooge and the Beagle Boys in EAT. Art by Daniel Braca, American script by David Gerstein, letter by A Machine, color by Joseph. This is one of the ones published by Egmont overseas. And the Scrooge, if I remember right, the Lifetime Scrooge McDuck was published overseas first. There's Gyro Gearloose, there's Donald, there's, of course, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the Beagle Boys. Some kind of creature that eats money. Of course, that would drive Donald insane. And then at the back, free Looney Tunes figurines from Honeycomb. Oh, that's kind of neat. And then, of course, the back cover for Twizzlers. All right. Next issue. This is issue 299 from August. And we got Uncle Scrooge playing Tiddlywinks with his money into his hat. Disney Snow White stamps and Sight Collector Stampede. These are from Grenada. These stamps like this. A lot of these smaller countries will make these stamps to help put money into their economy. And they're, if you collect stamps, they're nice to look at, but most of these have no value. It's kind of like those collector's plates that are sure to go up in value and they ain't worth shit. Okay, Uncle Scrooge. Front cover art by Daniel Braca, color by Gary Leach. Uncle Scrooge and the Two Safe, story and art by Carl Barks from Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, issue 171, December 1954. Colored by Susan Daigle Leach. This is from August of 96. So this is what? 42 years later. And let's see, you got the code there. So it's Walt Disney Comics and Stories 171. And it starts off with Donald is working as handyman for his rich Uncle Scrooge. Just really well. And I've got a lot more of these. It's just a handful I just found while I was digging through a box. I probably got 30 or 40 issues of this. Between this and there's another series called Uncle Scrooge Adventures that my cousin had. And that just came out mostly by the time Gladstone took it. And this is a new story, I'm assuming, the Cash Register Mystery. Art by Kay Wright, story by Mike Evanier. See, I was going to say, there's some people that worked outside of these that are known to, I don't want to be insulting. I'm going to use the term mainstream comic fans. And what I mean by mainstream comic fans, these are the comic fans that read DC and Marvel and read superhero stuff. They don't really dip into the other genres of comics, but, that's cool. Hey, read what you like. And we got the Beagle Boys. I always loved the Beagle Boys. Oh, I remember one year for Halloween, I was wanting to be a Beagle Boy. And then we got Put Some Fun in Your Mailbox. And we're off the descriptions of Walt Disney's Comics and Stories. 64-page prestige comic. $5.95 cover price. You can get a year for $32, which is bi-monthly, so 6 issues. So by this time, they were coming out bi-monthly. Walt Disney Giant, which is 48 pages, $2.25 cover price for $13. Uncle Scrooge, 32 pages for $1.50. And as you see, there's not that many ads in these. 32 pages meant you're probably getting 28 pages of comics. That's not bad considering at the time Marvel comics were $1.50 and you're not getting that much. You're probably getting 20 pages of story. Donald Duck, which is again 32 pages, $1.50 for $9. Uncle Scrooge Adventures, which came out the months that Uncle Scrooge didn't come out. Same setup as the rest. Donald Duck Adventures, same thing. And then Donald and Mickey. You notice how in comics, Mickey's not pushed. Mickey has never really been that big in the comic scene. The Ducks took over because, I'm sorry, but Mickey kind of became bland to me. I've always, for Disney, I'm not the world's biggest Disney fan. But for Disney, I want the Donald Duck. I want the Uncle Scrooge. I like Goofy. Mickey was just kind of like the way I feel about Superman. He's just kind of bland and boring. All right. Gyro Gearloose in Solar Shenanigans. Story and lettering, art, story, and lettering by Vic Lockman, colored by Colleen Winkler. And of course, he's hauling this Super Radiant Sphere for me. It almost looks like, of course, the Beagle brothers think it's gold. Lab of Gyro Gearloose Inventor. Let's see, it's at the solar system, and they're using... And, of course, the Carl Barks Library in color. And not bad. Does it say how many pages? It does not say. But you're getting, like this first one, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them for 5 stories, full stories. And Carl Barks stories are usually fairly long for $12. That's not a bad deal. Classic stories presented in classic style. The Carl Barks Library in color back issues available. And we get Uncle Scrooge Chess Driver. Story art by Vicar. Vicar is a European artist who did a lot of stuff for Disney. That's the story by Jim Kenner, color by Summer Hinton. And my understanding is the duck stuff is still big in Europe. There's even there's Donald as like what was his name? Oh, because they did a Genesis game where he's like an adventurer. He's got a different name. That was real big. And there's Donald is a superhero that was fairly big over there. I haven't read a lot of that stuff. I know Boom Studios there for a while had the Disney license, and they did a really good Darkwing series that was kind of like Darkwing and Retired was coming out. It's kind of like The Dark Knight Returns for Darkwing Duck. It was really, really good. And of course, like I said, that's the bad thing. These covers get damaged. Uncle Scrooge Adventures in color. The best of the best is now available on Gladstone's Walt Disney's Uncle Scrooge Adventures in Color by Carl Barks album series. Beginning with Uncle Scrooge 4-color 386, number one. These 56 affordable volumes will chronologically reprint all of Barks' Scrooge McDuck tales from Uncle Scrooge and various one-shot comics, all presented in uniform, high-quality, breathtaking computer color. They did go back and recolor these, which I don't have an issue with that. The only time they went back and recolored something, any companies went and recolor something I didn't care for was DC went back and redid the colors on The Killing Joke, and to me, the redone colors don't look near as good. But that's more, I'd seen the original for so many years, and I won't get into that. Albums 1 through 16 were released in 96, with the remaining 40 albums being published in 97 and 98. Additionally, a special 4-issue series of Walt Disney's Uncle Scrooge Adventures in Color by Don Rosa, featuring the 12-part Life of Scrooge McDuck, will be published, each with an exclusive trading card in April through July of 1996. I would love to have all those. And then we get the back ad for Kit Kat. And then the last one in this stack, this is issue 302 from February. I like this. The birds are stealing Uncle Scrooge's money to make a nest. And of course, subscribe to Gladstone. And now they're down to the Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, the big 64-page square bound. Excuse me. And then, of course, there are 4 monthly titles. 4 bi-monthly titles, which is Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck Adventures, Uncle Scrooge Adventures, and just Donald Duck. Now, this one is... Here we go. Front cover by Carl Barks, color by Gary Leach. Uncle Scrooge and Monkey Business, which is this one. Story art by Carl Barks from Walt Disney's Comics and Stories, 297, June of 65. Blah, blah, send comments. And email. Oh, you could email them. Monkey Business. Remember when I got these, I sat down and over the course of 2 or 3 days, just dived in and read so much Uncle Scrooge. Such great stuff. And this is, I'm surprised more people haven't read these because they're so well done. And like I said, they're all ages, but they're written where they'll appeal to kids and to adults. I like that in comics. I do enjoy my comics are written specifically for adults, like I've mentioned before, Preacher and, stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that, what the fuck is his name? Howard Chaykin's done. Garth Ennis stuff, Warren Ellis. But I enjoy stuff like this too, I'm not just a superhero reader. I try to read a little bit of everything with comics. Oh, look at this. It shows you a timeline when this was happening. 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close. Then we get a little one-page story here by art by Torres, colors by Colleen Winkler. It's probably a reprint from a Euro. Now this one is neat. This is Uncle Scrooge in the Telltale Hand. It's art by Tony Strobel from Uncle Scrooge 77, October 68, and colors by Summer Hinton. And then of course the Beagle Boys. Then we got Uncle Scrooge Adventures album. On Walt Disney, the Beagle Boys meet Abner the Actor. Art by Tony Strobel. Beagle Boys 8, July 1969. Color by Summer Hen. I forgot the Beagle Boys had their own comic for a while there. It was such, back in the days when, there was comics for everybody instead of, sadly, most comics being written and produced for a rapidly shrinking audience of males 20 to 35, 40. And that sure as fuck looks like Goofy. And Gyro Gearloose, Torres, and Colleen Winkler again. And then, of course, our back cover. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that. That's part of the reason I do this channel. So, talk about comics and movies and stuff that I don't see people talking about. I mean, the only really comic book channels I watch and pay attention to is Comic Tropes. Shout out to Comic Tropes. Really enjoy your stuff. This will date this, but the most recent one I saw was on Planetary. It's well done. I love Planetary. And Comics Historian. I used to watch Linkara, but it really feels like half the stuff he's talking about, he's never really read it. He's just, read the wiki on it. But Uncle Scrooge. Hope y'all enjoyed that. If you did, ba-boom, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Subscribe, all the other stuff. Thanks for listening, everybody. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.